Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. I'm really pleased after his first popular presentation as a somatic drummer about a lot of his research. Uh, Please welcome back Mr. Adam Gust. Adam, welcome back.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Yeah, great to see you all. Wow, Pamela Serafin's here. Great to see you, Dr. Pamela. I was a student of hers in a nervous system training, so it's an honor to have her presence here. Very studied researcher and drummer. And cool. So that's the idea. Yeah, and that's kind of where I've been, where I am, and where I'm going. I do want to do more public speaking about what I've been up to, not because I dream of being a public speaker, but just because I've seen an absence of this type of conversation out there. And actually, I do want to mention Pamela again, Dr. Pamela, because she was into this long before me, and I'm trying to catch up to it. And I'm just trying to bring it more into drum education. And so I'd like to start off with an experiential exercise as drummers before I get into more of the theoretical side of things. So, let's start off with just a simple exercise, right hand and right foot together, and left hand and left foot together, alternating sticking. So this, I kind of think of this as kind of in terms of biological evolution, this is kind of a reptilian understanding of coordination, right to left. And so if we add a double in the right hand, now we get to left hand and right foot coordination. This is cross coordination, and the right hand is playing with the left foot and the left hand is playing with the right foot. Now, to really check how these unisons are landing, it's a good idea to move the right hand to the hi-hat. And this gives us a really clear understanding of like how tight that unison really is. And now if we bring this into a drum set rhythm, we start to check how this upbeat is landing in our overall groove. So now if we double that, and we check that unison, we make sure it's tight. We try to start improvising a little bit with the left foot, and we start to really kind of challenge ourselves on how tight our unisons are. And then start improvising a little bit with the left hand. So this idea of kind of crossing this coordination with the right hand to left foot, this is a very mammalian and human coordination pattern. And this requires a lot of activity in our neocortex, our somatomotor cortex. And so in the part one, we talked about how to try to stay in the human brain versus regressing into the lizard brain. If we can play this is a bit of a totem to know that we are activating and staying present in our neocortex, if we're able to maintain this presence, this tight unison. And right hand on hi-hat along with this is a great way to demonstrate this. There is a file that I'd like to share. Hopefully we can get admin to help us share that. If not, we can send that out in a group email. But I just wanted to start off with this experiential exercise because I will be talking about a lot of theory. And I've noticed that some people tune out when I do that. And so if that happens, just kind of know that anything you're playing, if you do upbeat unison with the right hand and left foot, that's really challenging us to make sure that we're staying in unison throughout our body. And we're really making sure that we're staying in our somatomotor neocortex. So in terms of this application of some nervous system science I've been working on and how this relates to drumming, I'd like to talk about why I'm doing this. I didn't really talk about the why very much in part one. There's an influencer I really like, Simon Sinek, and he talks about start with why. And his TED Talk is one of my favorites. And so why I'm doing this is really because of something that happened on May 6th, 2010. I had this accident with a glass door on a gig, and I injured my hands. I had both hands in casts for 6 weeks. And, you know, it's a big challenge for a drummer and for just about anybody. But I had this 6-year period where this accident was resulting in this tension problem I had in my arm. And so I had this philosophy of movement as the brain telling the body what to do. And so according to this philosophy that I had, that most of us have, especially in Western culture, there's this obstacle. The tension is the obstacle. It's an enemy. There's this, kind of brain to hand neural transmission, and there's this thing getting in the way. And so I kind of thought, oh, well, I need to dominate this issue. It's impeding my intention. I need to find a way to beat this. It really became an enemy. And so if we look at tension as an enemy this way, as like this blockage of brain to body, this enemy, you start literally like kind of waging war on yourself. And the problem with waging war on yourself is that any casualties you suffer, you're inflicting them on yourself. It's not external. And so a way around this that I've been thinking more and more about is how it's not just the brain to the body. There's all this sensory information coming back to the brain. And so it's this cycle. And so rather than thinking about intending, in my brain for the body to do, the bidding of the brain, like the body is just this meat wagon that kind of hauls our brain around, really thinking like kind of to the body, from the brain, and from the body to the kind of this cycle of motor nerves and sensory nerves. And so thinking intention in less in terms of an enemy and more in terms of trying to a friend that we need to attend to, kind of befriending this tension that exists in the body. And so I'd like to talk about like this 6-year period. I had this problem with looking at the tension this way and like how I needed to kind of overcome this enemy in my body. And after 6 years, the casualties that I was suffering in this war, they got to a point where I just really needed a new philosophy. I really needed to kind of remove myself from the paradigms that I had grown up with and kind of take an external view to this, kind of zoom out. And so in doing so, I found this kind of that movement is actually a two-way street. Rather than the brain telling the body what to do, it's actually sensory information tells us what our body is up to at the given moment, and then our brain predicts what we want to do in accordance to whatever our goals are, whether they're long-term goals or whether it's just moving from hi-hat to floor tom. So yeah, this two-way street of movement really redimensioned how I think about how we work with our nervous system. And so I found something called somatic experiencing therapy, and I started working with a therapist that was able to connect this sensory information with the motor information that was getting blocked, that was causing this tension in my arm for so long. And I talk about it in my TED Talk, Science of the Groove, but in this context, as a musician, this blocked a whole lot of things. I think it kind of blocked me from myself. There's kind of a masculinity element to it. We like to think as men, we have this dominance over our body. And when that doesn't happen, like this kind of potency, we like to think we have this, it kind of becomes impotency. And I've had some kind of struggling with my family. I didn't want to share it to them. I got a little disconnected from them. In the musical community, I would notice when I'd go to jam sessions, this tension would happen. And so I didn't want to go to jam sessions anymore. I became fearful of playing in front of people, and that kind of disconnected me from my community. And so it was this disconnection from myself that resulted in this external disconnection. And so grateful to somatic experiencing for kind of helping me to understand how to integrate things in between motor and sensory nerves, and also, better integrate with my community. And that's really the why I'm here. I've had some people say, oh, it sounds like you're just trying to promote yourself as an educator, or you're trying to make money or something like that. And I've had a really negative emotional reaction to those kind of conversations. And so I just want to be really clear, like I'm here to try to help anyone who might be struggling with this connection between motor and sensory nerves, intention for what we want to do, and noticing how to implement what we want to do into the world as drummers and as humans. So yeah, somatic experiencing made a big difference for me. And so I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine that I thought was an enemy for a long time. His name is Sam. So this is Sam. He is a somatic afferent model. So somatic means everyone can see Sam. Yeah, I'm not used to screen sharing. So who Sam is somatic, he's SAM. Somatic means of the body, and afferent is afferent nerves, sensory nerves, and model well, he doesn't look like much of a model. You won't see him on the cover of magazines or anything, but he's a model representing how our sensory information is noticed in our neocortex, in our somatomotor cortex. So you'll see some disproportionate parts of Sam, and especially in the hands and the feet and the face and perhaps other parts. But I think that this model really kind of helps us to understand some of these portals that we have into accessing our neocortex and really staying present and staying human. And this kind of exterior layer of the brain is really the kind of human adaptation, this evolution of cognition. And so we notice like, okay, through the hands and through the face and through the feet, these are some ways to kind of stay present in our neocortex. And so Sam was somebody that I was in conflict with because he was not happy with me at all, because I was feeling like I had this kind of dominance hierarchy idea, mind over matter, kind of a, I felt like he was the enemy that I was trying to beat. And a mental toughness is a phrase you may have heard, and that kind of came into play when I think about him. But as I kind of learned to befriend him and know this information that he was trying to tell me, it really helped me to kind of reconnect with myself and with my community. And so, yeah, he's what I'm doing here. So this idea of like sensory information coming to the body and intention and prediction going sensory information going to the brain and intention going to the body. There's this element of performance and healing that I want to talk about, because somatic experiencing it's a healing therapy that I experienced that made a huge difference in my life. And I noticed after I started to kind of heal this tension that was in my arm, I noticed that I would start to play better. I mean, I would even watch videos of myself before my sessions with Debbie, and I was like, wow, I'm playing more relaxed. I feel better. And so I was like, wait, well, there's this performance aspect to somatic experiencing that I really wasn't predicting at all. And so, because my brain always thought of performance and healing as two different things. Like performance is something that happens on the artistic stage and the athletic court. And, healing something that happens in the hospital or, with medication. But when I started to kind of have this somatic kind of bottom up perspective of how the nervous system resources itself, I started understanding, oh, well, performance and healing are just kind of two sides of the same coin, this resilience coin, I like to think of it. So the resources we use in our nervous system to perform and to heal are very similar. And so, the brain, you're fine to think of performance and healing as separate, but I think in terms of the somatic drummer program that I'm developing, I really looking at them as the same thing. So ways to resource our nervous system to both benefit healing and performance. And so there's this phrase that I feel kind of ties these two things together that I'll be bringing up throughout. It's got teaching, resilience, and understanding mindful awareness. So it's 6 words, and it's essentially 2 different concepts. There's the teaching resilience part, which is the performance part, kind of the motor nerves, essentially, the intention. And understanding mindful awareness is this brain-body connection, staying present, and to really understanding the sensory nerves and sort of quieting the mind. It's kind of meditative idea comes to mind for this. And so teaching resilience and understanding mindful awareness, I'll get more into how that applies to drum practice a little later. But there's one more image I'd like to share with you, and that is the window of tolerance. So this is Dan Siegel. It's his concept. So we have this kind of, in terms of performance and healing, I like to think performance is it's an expansion, and healing is the expansion, and performance is the compression. And so we're kind of oscillating back and forth. Performance kind of becomes healing in real time. We're trying to resource our nervous system to meet the needs of our performance. And so, yeah, this model kind of shows this is a groove as the way I see it. So it's kind of like we go up tick and then we go down. It's kind of equal and opposite. So that's what a groove looks like in terms of the window of tolerance. And now I'd like to share what a non-groove looks like. In biological terms, this is kind of being dysregulated. So this image, we see the groove laid down. We're kind of staying in between, kind of being sympathetic response, fight or flight, and shutdown response. And so, when we stay within this kind of this homeostasis, health, growth, and restoration. We are able to compress and expand health with health. When we go beyond our tolerance levels, and we can get stuck there. We have to have the ability to tolerate these stresses and still bring ourselves back in our performance to still heal from that which is stressing us. And so what would happen when my arm would tense up, I feel like I got stuck. I got stuck in this activation and I wasn't attending enough to the healing aspect of being attentive to the sensory information. So this applies to so much. Any of us who record ourselves, I'm sure we've seen this kind of sine wave a lot in our DAWs. I mean, a nice smooth sine wave looks good. Anything that's jagged and irregular is probably a not so great sound. But if you think about breath, it makes the most sense with breathing, just because we have the inhale and then we need equal and opposite exhale. And so if we inhale more than we exhale, eventually we're going to explode, right? That's the ultimate dysregulation. And heartbeat expanding and contracting, this follows this model. And then even like kick and snare being even, this is just kind of a universal model for so many things. And so I'd like to do an experiential breath practice. So there's a biometrics and biomechanics and biochemistry of breathing. It's an overview. I mean, I could spend an hour easily on breathing. To really dig into this, you need to have somebody who's a certified breath instructor. Fortunately, we do. I do have to have a little institutional credibility, especially having a doctor of neuroscience drummer in the room. But so if in terms of the biomechanics of drumming, first, I'd like to have some imagery. Imagery really helps the brain to understand things. There's embodied cognition, which claims that all sensation is imagery. So I'll get into that a little later. But this image I like to think of the biomechanics of breathing is this 1 foot wide elastic band. So imagine this 1 foot wide elastic band going all the way around the world, and it has a 1 foot slit in it. So it's a slit here. Now put this slit over our heads and let the elastic band rest on our shoulders. So here we are up here with the elastic band over us, and the elastic band goes all the way around the world. So when we inhale, imagine the world expanding with our inhale. Kind of everyone sit up straight and drop the shoulders and kind of have this symmetry to the body, and just imagine this elastic band and take a slow breath in. Imagine the world breathing with you, and just feel a little bit of kind of pull on the shoulders. And what this does, it helps us to bring the belly out. A lot of us are a little sensitive about our bellies coming out. I'm guilty of that. But in terms of the mechanics of breathing, this is really the optimal place to diffuse oxygen into your body, which you will definitely be using if you're a high performance drummer. And so a slow, deep breath in, feel kind of a little bit of tug on this elastic band, air pulling into the belly, and as you relax and let the breath out, let the world compress, and a little bit of a relaxation on the tension in the elastic band. And so just keep breathing this way. I give you permission to keep breathing. And we're going to talk a little bit now about beyond the mechanics and talk about a little bit of the biochemistry, this relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide that's been so misunderstood for so long. It definitely was with me. I was taught that carbon dioxide is a waste gas, and it absolutely is not. We think about waste materials of the body. You eat food and the waste material comes out, right? If there was no waste material, we would be perfectly fine. Our lives would actually be better if that didn't exist. But in terms of carbon dioxide, this is a vital component of getting oxygen into our bodies. So when we breathe in, we're taking oxygen into the lungs, and oxygen is diffused from the alveoli into the bloodstream. And there's this little bit of a little counterintuitive idea of this relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide. So as keep breathing, keep imagining this elastic band in your shoulders. And now I would like you to decrease the amount of breath you're taking in to the point that you're just barely feeling air coming in, just barely feel the hairs tickling in your nose as your world of breath is expanding and the elastic band is compressing. And now just feel as you're exhaling, just barely feel the air come out through the nose and exclusively breathe through the nose. For the longest time, we didn't know why we had nitric oxide in our nasal cavity. And it's because this chemical helps oxygen to diffuse in the lungs. So the more we breathe through the nose, the more we're taking in oxygen and nitric oxide, and that actually helps us get oxygen into our body. And if we breathe out through our nose, we're not losing hydration or body temperature as we would if we breathe out through the nose. So we're maintaining all these metabolic resources. It's great to exclusively breathe in and out through the nose as much as possible. So now as we decrease the amount of oxygen we're taking in, we are increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in our blood. And now this sounds bad, but what's happening is this carbon dioxide is increasing the acidity in our blood, which releases oxygen from the hemoglobin into our body tissues, which is what really helps us to play. So it's a little counterintuitive, I know, but so same with the window of tolerance. We don't want to breathe too shallowly and flatline, literally. We want to have just this little bit of waver, but it doesn't bring about a little bit of a sympathetic nervous system response, a little bit of fight or flight. But we just want to temper that, because if we do this before we play, we're going to have more oxygen to play with in our hands. We'll start to feel our palms warm up. We'll start to feel a little bit of saliva in our throat, and this decreased breathing is going to really help us in performance. We don't want to do this if we're trying to sleep or relax, because it does amp up the nervous system, but this is a great breath preparation for performance. This is much more on the performance end of things. All right, so that's enough theory. Thank you for dealing with me so far. Now we're going to get back into the drumming. We're all here for drumming. So the same window of tolerance model, I believe, applies to movement. So there's this concept that I believe is a bit flawed with drum education, this idea that you pick up the stick and immediately play the pad. I believe that before the pad does not assist your movement. The pad, or I mean, whatever surface is rebounding, it's not going to fix any problems that you have in your movement. It's just going to make them worse. And so let me explain. So if we look at the window of tolerance model, when we move, we have the uptick and we have the downtick. So I like to think of kind of this midline here and kind of this sine wave going on in our movements as drummers. In part one, he talked about the globe image. I'm trying to entice people who haven't seen it to go check it out. And then we talked about the bow staff move, the Mobius stroke, the infinity stroke that helps us to kind of move around the drum set this way. And so all these movements, they bring about fluidity. They really pay attention to this compression and expansion wave that we're talking about. So I'd like everyone to just kind of think about that, like moving the sticks up and down in the air without hitting a surface. Just try to imagine where that midline is. Just try to think about, okay, we have above and below. And now try to have that kind of mirror image symmetry in the hands, and just like feel what that's, think about how that's affecting our tempo, and kind of think about it in terms of regulating our body, regulating our movement, and kind of keep in mind this image of the window of tolerance. Now I'm going to show you an exercise that you will be working on the rest of your life. It's very simple and it's very challenging. You're going to suss out where that kind of shutdown level of the window of tolerance is. That, if you notice, like, try to make sure the left hand hit or kind of stop at the same point, that tolerance point at the bottom in the air. Now slowly drop that point down to where it touches the drum. And so I call this, where is the drum? Because our brain is like, I know where the drum is. It's right in front of me. What the hell? But our body is like, okay, where is the drum? Well, let's find out where it is, because we're not touching it yet. But if we have real control over this window of tolerance, we'll be able to just barely tap the drum in unison. And you'll hear how I'm totally failing at this right now. I told you it's hard. So yeah, it's real, like the bigger the stroke, maintaining this, like knowing exactly where the drum is, you're sussing out where that low level of the window of tolerance is. And you'll notice this, so now there's kind of breaking this relationship between stick height and dynamics. And so just barely gracing it. It's okay if you miss it. This is all about finding out where the drum is. So this is your body trying to figure out where the drum is. And then now play through. They heard people talk about playing through the drum. Now imagine this kind of the shutdown level of the window of tolerance going through the drum. And that brings the dynamic up. So now the window of tolerance is shifted from here to here. And in doing so, you've increased your dynamic range. Now, this is it. And so the stick kind of is a little more stuck into the head. And so now back off, say maintain the same kind of tolerance level, but just bring it up until it ceases to be touching the drum and is back in the air. So that's a dynamic exercise. And so now the next level of this is, if you did see part one, and you know the kind of, we have the ball and socket joint here that has to do with the bioevolution of fish, and then reptilian and mammalian, the ball and socket joint of elbow and wrist, and then we get into fingers individuation, which is mammalian, and then tool use, which is human. We got to the globe imagery of trying to develop this ball and socket joint in our drum technique. Now we start to apply this to the pad. So we're going to be playing in the same place. Let's go with, we all understand German. Let's go to kind of this outward rotary, this like longitude lines of the half globe being here. This is a lot of hand on top of the stick. This is a very strong stroke. And now we back off and we come more in turn. This is German, this is American, this turns to French. And now we're in inward rotary, and we're kind of, the elbows are kind of moving in accordance with the wrists to follow this globe image. And what's happening, we're moving from having all this weight of the hand on top of the stick to having the weight of the hand underneath the stick. Anyone who's studied Gruber kind of understands like this fulcrum, and this is a really nice light way of playing, but we're still able to get power because of the velocity. So the velocity brings the power, not the weight of the hand. And so just notice, if we kind of are just tapping, we're just kind of sussing out that lower threshold of the window of tolerance on the pad. Now let's shift over to French, American, German, and you'll notice that the volume increases. And go back to Gruber, and it gets a little lighter. And so we're not increasing the amount of power we're exerting, but we're getting a dynamic variation. And this is so useful. I notice, like with J.R. Robinson, he'll play this way, he'll play German in the left and French kind of in the right. So he gets kind of a lighter sound here in French, and he gets a more powerful sound playing German. And that way he can still have more kind of an equilibrium between the two sides of the body, but have this dynamic contrast. So the dynamics come from understanding where our window of tolerance is in terms of movement, playing through the drum, going back to a rest essentially, and also how our mechanics affect our dynamics. And another reason why this understanding dynamics in terms of stick height is so important is because rate equals distance times time. There's this mathematical equation that pretty much tells us how fast we're going, the distance we're traveling, and our time are all related. So if we're playing here and suddenly we have to hit a crash over here and we're trying to play quiet, we have to be able to have this quiet dynamic in that distance, which is on the pad, which is this. So if we want to be able to have dynamic consistency at low temp or at low volume levels, we really have to master this concept of playing with big stick heights and being able to have the control in the fingers, knowing where the drum is, right? And again, like if you look at it from the brain to the body, it's like, what, the drum's there, I see it's there, I hit it, I know it's there. But man, you really tune into, does the body know? You know, if our body knows where the drum is, that means we have this really sensitive dynamic control, which only comes from understanding how movement works in terms of our fingers and hands as ball and socket joints. And this is all, again, very keeping in the somatomotor cortex, because we're working with tools, we're working with fingertip sensitivity. This is the radial, median, and ular nerves in the hands, the kind of the in-hand balance. These are all things that regulate the brain, and in terms regulate the system of keeping keeping within our tolerance level in the body. So that's kind of the spiel of how the theory relates to the practice. I practice this all the time. In fact, this is a regular practice setup for me, which is hat and kick and pad, because this kind of flipped script of dynamics helps me to really hear how the feet are acting. Because I mean, I think, the hands are closer to us, like the sound hits us here. I think we always attend more to our hands, and kind of doing this practice forces us to really tune into the feet. And this one, try that out with any beat you're playing. First try it on downbeat eighth notes, and then try it on upbeat eighth notes. and really see how that dynamic works out. So, and forcing us into this cross-lateral coordination, which really triggers a lot of emphasis on connecting the body with the human neocortex. So, yeah, we're about halfway. We got any questions so far?
I actually have a question, Adam.
Oh, yeah, what?
You mentioned the feet and the pedals. Do you have a similar exercise or thought process about how your foot lands on the pedal? I know I don't want to, that could probably be another seminar, but.
No, I love it. Yeah, actually, Anthony had that question. And I like to kind of, you noticed in our friend Sam, that's like these huge hands. I feel like it's kind of good to have this concept in the hands first and then relate it to the feet. So I'm actually just getting into that. So first I'm going to show you this exercise in the hands, and then I'll show you the exercise in the feet. So if you're, again, unisons is how I believe we find presence. We really connect the feeling of unison. Then this is a unison. If we really go equal and opposite in the hands and clap like this is how we find unison here. And if we relate that to both sticks coming down, that's unison here. And then when we start moving unisons around the drums, we want it all to feel like this. This is how our body feels unison in time. And so this unison exercise with the hands we did last time, and we also talked about push-pull, about how kind of this reptilian idea of like all fingers kind of compressing together, just one signal to the fingers. It's kind of a reptilian idea. And then this pull idea, using the finger control, that brings us more into mammalian, the crouching tiger or hidden dragon technique. So that's kind of this push-pull idea. And now if we do push-pull in unison, it looks like this. And now if we nuance this, we're in duple. Now we're going to shift to triple. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, mammal, reptile, reptile, mammal, reptile, reptile. So if we go back and forth from mammal to reptile technique, we're kind of keeping ourselves from getting stuck in reptile, which I was doing when my arm would tense up. So this is 3. So now if we go back and forth from 2 to 3, we kind of feel what unison feels like. Remember the finger exercise we did last time? We want to feel how this unison works in terms of push-pull. Now here comes the contralateral one that kind of messed a lot of us up in the finger control. So now I have 2 in the left hand and 3 in the right hand. This is an in-hand balance exercise. We're working with brain lateralization, we're working with focusing on the neocortex, and we're also working with the body to make sure that we have access to both the human mammalian aspects of the hand and the reptilian power that we get from the hand. So did that make sense to everyone, how we're kind of doing duple and triple against the hands in general? Okay, well, let's try the feet now. This is what I love to do at the grocery store when I'm stuck in line behind that person with 8 million things and their debit card doesn't work and you're kind of stuck standing there. So just kind of rock back and forth from heels to toes in your hand. I'm sorry, heels to toes in your feet. So this is duple. Now go to triple. 1, 2, 3, 4, heel, toe, toe, heel, toe, toe, heel, toe, toe, heel, toe, toe. Back to duple. 1, 2, 3, duple. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now bring the 3 into the right foot and the duple into the left foot, going heel to toe. 1, 2, 3, 4. Heel, toe, toe, heel, toe, toe. In the right. And in the left, heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. This is brain lateralization. This is balance. We're affecting our balance in the body. We're shifting this weight between heel and toe. And we're also getting a little bit into the neocortex because like we had in-hand balance, now we have in-foot balance. In like martial arts, they talk a lot about the heel and the ball. It's kind of a trifecta. I'm only dealing with the heel to toe. But so this is a balance exercise, and making sure that these land perfectly together is really going to help our drumming when we start doing different things between the right foot and the left foot. So that's how one way, and then you can start, like I talked about ways to play paradiddles, like one. So that's kind of push-pull in unison going back and forth, and you can do the same in the feet. And so I was at the Hollywood Bowl last night. It was Herbie Hancock doing Wayne Shorter music and just a litany of the most amazing musicians all night long. And I remember I was just kind of like pulsing my feet along because the time got pretty obscure a lot. Terry Lynn Carrington murdered it, dude. Woof. But so I mean, and I just found myself like I was kind of trying to bring up this somatic activity in the body and connecting it with what I was hearing, you know, and so that kind of helped me to sort of metabolize, I guess, a lot more, bring the music into me if I could do this duple and triple unison in my feet. So I mean, basically, you can do this anywhere. So yeah, you were asking about the feet. Was that kind of give some clarity, Joe?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yep.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. Okay, well, we've got 20 minutes left. There is this, for anyone who's interested in this kind of philosophical shift, I'm not the only one doing this. I mean, in fact, there's a neuroscientist, Antonio Damasio, that I'm a fan of, and he's really on the tip of understanding how somatics are affecting the neuroscience of this. In fact, there's a book I would recommend. It's called Descartes' Error. And he really pinpoints how there was this shift, philosophical shift in education and philosophy and science and politics that really started privileging the mind over the body. You know, you may have heard him say, I think, therefore I am. And so that really, okay, well, I think, therefore I am. The body becomes this meat wagon. I like to think of like, it's just kind of does the bidding of the brain, which is now, I mean, neuroscience is finding more and more this is completely wrong. It's an error to think about our body this way. And in fact, it's the error that was causing me so many problems with tension in my arm. And I would suspect it's an error that causes a lot of us tension in our playing and in our lives. And so I'd just like to blow through a few ideas of how this relates. So in terms of performance and healing, the sort of Descartes' view of performance and healing is that they're two separate things, but the body actually sees them as two sides of the coin. In terms of practice, Descartes would feel like, okay, well, we're using the body as a tool to play our drumming, and the body sees the drumming as the tool to build our embodiment. And in terms of research, Descartes would say, kind of really focus on quantitative research, really reducing things down to minute pieces so that they're understandable. And the body thinks about seeking out sameness, more qualitative research, which I'm into. I mean, feeling is a quality. It's hard to quantify feeling. And so it's much more of this bottom-up perspective in terms of learning. You know, the Descartes version would be taking things in. The body's idea is bringing things out. More like the root of education is educe, which is to bring out which is latent. And so that's what I'm trying to do somatically. And so emotions, you know, Descartes tries to relegate emotions in the body, and our body tries to regulate rather than relegate. It tries to stay inside the window of tolerance. And I actually one last one I'd like to mention. History, you know, we study history, so we're not doomed. Or if we don't study history, we're doomed to repeat it. And so Descartes' idea of this, well, we need to study the history of our culture, history of our family, history of our lineage, whatever. The body's idea, we need to study the history of our emotions. We need to go back, our attachment. We need to study our stress response profile. We need to do deep self-inquiry into our emotions, or else we're doomed to repeat it over and over and over and over. And so there's a book, Grandmother's Hands, I really like. Resmaa Menakem talks about dirty pain and clean pain. And so repeating this emotional profile that we have over and over, it's painful, but it's dirty. And so if we really dig into how we experience emotions, there's gonna be pain involved, but it's gonna be clean. It's gonna be moving us somewhere. And in terms of drumming, it's gonna help us with ease and coordination and timing and so many things that help to regulate ultimately the vagus nerve. And so what this sounds like to the brain is, oh, this is all paradoxical. This is all contrary. It's all opposite. It doesn't make any sense. But to the body, it's all complementary. It's all kind of, equal and opposite. It's all mirror image, reversing the polarity. I mean, if you just focus on the top end of things, it's like a half a wheel. It's like, that's how it rolls, like just flop, flop. But when you get both sides of it, the wheel is in motion and you get much more inertia that way. So the last example I would like to talk about, kind of this brain-body connection, is in terms of a bank account. Mind on my money and my money on my mind. That's the brain's idea of our bank account. But the body's idea of what we're banking. What is our currency? And that's when I'd like to bring up what resilience coins are. We're spending resilience coins. We're depositing resilience coins in our body. And so I'd like to talk about this somatic bank account. And that's really what gets into volition practice. That's like the more we research our nervous system, the more we have volition, will, intention over our body. And so then when our neocortex is firing, it's using a lot of metabolic resources. It's depleting what we have, and we need to deposit major resilience coins into our nervous system to keep our neocortex active. It's kind of like Wi-Fi. We have this Wi-Fi signal coming in from the street, and then it hits the router, which is the brainstem, and then it hits the modem, and then it's the router, which sends the Wi-Fi to the neocortex. And to keep the Wi-Fi strong, we have to really have a strong signal. We have to have strong currency, a strong current in our somatic bank account to keep the neocortex happening. And so this comes largely from vagus nerve research. So there's the polyvagal ladder, which is something I studied with the Polyvagal Institute. Kundalini Yoga talks about stacking the 6 chakras. There's all this history of people who have observed the nervous system in different ways. They kind of understand how you need to go from the bottom up, from the pelvic floor up through the stomach and lower kind of digestive elements, up supradiaphragmatically up into the lungs and heart. And then eventually it gives us access to brain lateralization, to kind of harmonizing both sides of the brain. And so there's a coordination exercise that I developed based on the polyvagal ladder and having to do with the somatic bank account. And what I noticed is it relates directly to the 6 chakras in Kundalini Yoga. And so I just kind of this universality of kind of this brain-body connection started occurring to me. And I like to call it the graces. So it was grounding, relaxation, awareness, centering, energizing, and synergy. These are the 6 coordination levels from the bottom up. And I stole it from Esalen Institute, some trainings I did there. And this really gets into Celine's question from last time. Is there a quick way to get back to human brain while playing if dysregulation kicks in? And so my answer, I focused on the quick way. Is there a quick way? Is there a quick fix? Absolutely not. But is there a way to do it? Yes. It's by really focusing on how do we deposit resilience coins into our somatic bank account. So this grounding idea I touched on a little bit earlier with the feet. Grounding is very much heels on the ground, evenly balanced, knowing that we're not going to face plant ourselves. Like our nervous systems, you got one job, don't fall on your face. And so if we want to deposit some resilience coins in the somatic bank account, make sure that your weight is evenly distributed on your feet. And I call this checking your balance. Like your bank account in terms of the brain, you check your balance to see what the balance is in the bank. And in terms of somatic exercises, you're checking the balance in your feet. And so what this is, so we're going to have a regulation rhythm. Hopefully there's a rhythmic titration file that I'd like to join. Joe, was there any? No, okay. Okay. Well, I'd like to share that. Rich, thank you very much for Rich Stitzel printed out this beautiful excerpt of rhythmic titration. And unfortunately, we can't share it, but we'll get that out to you in an email. And so it's a way to apply these different rhythmic variations to these 6 levels of coordination that align with polyvagal theory and Kundalini Yoga and Esalen Institute practices and Aikido, martial arts, blah, blah, blah. Anyone who's studied the nervous system gets this bottom-up need to regulate and achieve homeostasis before we can access kind of brain lateralization, which is so crucial for drummers. So we're going to have this regulation rhythm in the feet. This is just 8th notes. We're going to ground ourselves there, and we're going to add a stressor rhythm in the hands. So I talked about how duple is a little bit more kind of lizard, and triple is a little bit more mammalian. So we're going to add the 3 in the hands. So ground yourselves in the rhythm in the feet. Try to have that idea of that balance between heels and toes. While we're doing this, I like to think about kind of shifting weight more to the heel and then shifting weight more to the toe and seeing how that feels, seeing how that affects time, distance, rate, and time. So we're just kind of doing a check-in and check our breathing, check our posture, check our facial expression, maybe add a little bit of push-pull in the hands, just add a lot of variation inside of this framework. So this is kind of the grounding level of coordination. Good. That's the G in the graces. Now we're going to move to the R in graces, which is the next level, which is relaxation. I like to call this canceling your subscriptions. So we subscribe to tension a lot based on our kind of past experience and how our biography imprinted on our biology. And we want to cancel these subscriptions to tension that aren't serving us, these maladaptive kind of coping mechanisms that we've all developed over the years, particularly those of us who are over 50, which I turned recently. We've amassed a lot of cumulative tension in our lives. And so this is especially important for us. And so canceling your subscriptions, this is a good way to think about this next layer of coordination. So we're going to put the regulation rhythm duple in the hands, and now we're going to put the triple in the feet. And now when we put the stressor rhythm in the feet, this is a bit more activation, isn't it, than it was before? Whoa, especially with this pedal. Whoops, sorry. And so when we activate the rate in the feet, we're kind of increasing our regulation in terms of our fight or flight response. Actually, our calf muscles have been called our second heart. And as we bring the heels up off the floor, we're flexing and relaxing our calf muscles, which actually affects blood flow, which impacts our heart rate. So the faster we're kind of lifting the heels up and dropping them, we're actually affecting our heart rate. So yeah, this is definitely amping up our window of tolerance, you know. And so this next, that layer of coordination, regulation rhythm versus stressor rhythm, is the R in the graces. It's kind of it's the second level of the chakra. It's the next step up from the polyvagal ladder. It's kind of a little bit more focused in terms of our biology, a little bit moving one layer up from the pelvic floor up into the stomach. And so now so if we go back and forth, start nuancing it with some different variations. We start shifting back and forth from grounding to relaxation. This is kind of this fish evolutionary coordination level I'm talking. Like fish, when they would swim, it'd be more of a back to front sort of movement idea of coordination. And so this is kind of base level in terms of evolutionary biology. That's where we are in this coordination practice. So now, okay, awareness is the next layer of the graces. And so we're moving up the ladder, up the chakras. Awareness is having the regulation rhythm on the right side and the stressor rhythm on the left side. So we start off with duple in the right hand and left foot, and put the triple in the left hand and left foot. And then you can add different variations of push and pull. And so that's kind of grounding the time in the right and adding the stressor in the left. And awareness has everything to do with how the breath relates to the heart rate. So if you kind of decrease your breathing when you're doing this and you really try to feel the heart rate without having to check your pulse with the hands, you can kind of check, okay, how is my physiology being affected? How is my emotional state being affected when I go up to this next level chakra with this particular 2/3 polyrhythm? And so now when we go to centering, awareness I call boosting your income. You're kind of, the more that's comfortable you are with this, the more resilience coins you're starting to add into your somatic bank account. And so now we're going to move to centering, which I call balancing your cash flow. And I like this phrase because flow is very much a part of this. So we're going to put the regulation rhythm, the time in the left, and add the stressor rhythm, the 3, in the right. And so now we're going to go back and forth between awareness and centering. And martial arts would call this kind of a flow exercise, being able to do something equally on the right as we do on the left. And if you're able to shift back and forth easily, it gets into Tai Chi. And I've been working with bow staff a lot, and I've noticed there are certain moves with the bow staff that definitely suck in the left hand. And I'm trying to get this flow to be even back and forth from right to left. And what this is doing is really working with brain harmonization between the left and right hemispheres. And so this back and forth coordination exercise between the third and fourth chakras, this is more of a reptilian idea, like kind of the reptile became amphibian, became a reptile, emerged from the ocean floor, and now it's moving right to left. And so now that's the kind of the reptilian back and forth model. And so now we're getting into the E in graces, which I like to think is energize, which is giving yourself high yield interest. And so when we're, now this is going to be the regulation rhythm in the right hand and the left foot, and the stressor rhythm in the left hand and the right foot. So I started off with this just to kind of give you a precursor of where I'm going, because, and in case anybody tuned out, at least they would get some takeaways. But so now we're getting further up in the chakras. Now we're activating more of the lungs and the heart. This is definitely more of a sympathetic response. This is more challenging. This is requiring more of our neocortex, but it's also giving us this totem, this way to make sure that we're still in our human brain. So let's put the regulation rhythm in the right hand and the left foot, and the stressor rhythm, the 3, in the left hand and the right foot. Really make sure they're unisons. I talked about this completing the sensation circuit, combining the feeling of the unison, making the unison feel like that, the same way it does like this. And so having this, completing the sensation circuit on 2 different levels through this coordination from right hand to left foot, now we're really activating the processing in the processing in the brain and connecting with the body. And so now, as you probably predicted, synergizing is going to be the regulation rhythm in the left hand and the right foot, and we're going to put the stressor in the right hand and the left foot. So, duple. And as you predicted, now that we're up into the 5th and 6th chakras, we're going to we're entering into the synergizing, where synergy is this whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When you enter this last layer of these coordination levels, that's really when you can say, okay, I am embodying the 3/2 polyrhythm. I can stack it up. I can play it every which way I want. And now really this becomes into this mammalian level of evolution, is to be able to go back and forth and do self-inquiry and see how this is affecting our physiological state. So we're going to start off with the grounding rhythm in the right hand and left foot. 3 in the... Now we're going to switch to synergizing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now back. See, I'm totally choking. I am not in my human brain. Try that again. Whoops. So as I'm switching back and forth, once you develop the coordination to do this, then you do the self-inquiry. How am I shift a little more balance to the heels, shift more balance to the toes and the feet, be able to shift back and forth from push-pull, and then eventually you start moving this around the drum set, so that when you start changing the distance, which affects the rate and the time, you're still trying to keep the time solid, keep the rate solid, and still remain emotionally centered. Because as from part 1, I talked about how when we're in fight or flight, our perception of time changes, and that affects our tempo. And so these are all ways, and so this is, you might, well, wait a minute, Adam, like there are 7 chakras. What about the 7th one? Thank you for asking. So the 7th chakra is our brain. It's our conceptualization. I wanted to have some time to talk about embodied cognition, but I'll suffice it to say that if the body completely understands 3/2 and all these 6 different layers, then we can kind of just drop this information from the harmony that we've developed in our brain, and we can play it however we want. We can really respond to the music that we're listening to in an embodied way. We don't have any hang-ups. We can remain emotionally centered. We've developed this tolerance to stress that, really can benefit us in all areas of our playing and our lives. So yeah, it's 11 o'clock. Dang, I wanted to leave room for questions. Are there any questions I could?
Anthony did have one, and I just want to get to it for him. It's sort of a general question. I don't know. Could you please talk about how all of this relates to your time feel?
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, because as I said with the vagus nerve, there's this shutdown response, which makes us drag, and it more is kind of felt lower in the belly. And there's this activation, which is felt in the chest. So in terms of the window of tolerance, it becomes this imbalance. And when we get out of imbalance in our biological systems, our homeostasis, Dan Siegel would call that allostasis. We get into allostasis, which we try to come back to homeostasis, which rest, growth, and health, growth, and restoration. And so when we shift these physiological states, we lack awareness of the shift in heart rate, our perception of time in the outside world changes. And so the more centered we are, the more regulated we are. I love this quote that I heard once. I wish I could remember who said it, but it says, when you know that exciting part of the song is coming, don't get excited. That's what makes it exciting. And that's such a beautiful description of how our emotions affect the music, because oh man, Adam, what are you talking about regulating my emotions? I want to be emotional. I want to charge the music with my emotions. But when that emotional part of the song comes, you want to be regulated so that the emotion can be in the music rather than inside of you. It's kind of this selfish emotional approach if you think you want to let your emotions run wild here, because that's going to affect everybody in the band. The guitar player might not want to be in fight or flight when he's already at the threshold of the tempo that he's able to play. Right? So you want to, when that exciting moment comes, which it definitely did last night at the bowl, dang, but I could just see it. And I could, Jack DeJohnette, man. I mean, he was murdering, and his face was just and I felt it. I didn't see it in his physiology, but I heard it in the music, because he was removing this emotional dysregulation from his body and putting it into the musical connection with these participants on stage with him.
Yeah. Amazing.
Cool, man. Thank you all for staying. I mean, it's been 6 years of really muddling with this and not knowing how to convey it to people. And a lot of people just kind of telling me, yeah, Adam, keep doing what you're doing. But finally, yeah, I know, right, Rich? Yeah. So in terms of the vagus nerve, there are vagus nerve, cranial nerves that are going to the mouth. And if we chew, like Dennis Chambers does with gum, it's a form of regulating the vagus nerve. And so if anyone wants to try that, when you're chewing, we're actually it's this repetitive kind of expansion and compression in the mouth. It can help to regulate the body. And so, yeah, blowing bubbles or chewing gum, it's anything that we can do, any way we find to regulate our vagus nerve is effectively going to keep us inside of this window of tolerance, kick and snare, remaining even and consistent, equal and opposite.
Real quick, just get to Jeff's question. Further to this previous question, why is it that sometimes playing a tune with a 120 BPM click feels faster or slower on different days?
It depends heavily on your physiological state. In part one, I talked about matrix, how when the bullet's flying at you, you need to slow down your perception. You go into fight or flight, and your vagus nerve it essentially puts on this brake, and it really shuts down all other bodily information to focus on how can we move quickly to adapt to this new threat. And when we go into fight or flight and we go into this kind of shutting down all of our other metabolic resources in order to focus on what we're doing, that shifts our perception of time. And so if we're playing with a metronome at 120 and we're a little bit activated, like our heart rate is more around 90 or 100 than it was the previous day at 80 or 75, we're going to feel that 120 BPM differently. because the first drummer in history, that was somewhere between the development of tools and the development of language. There's this piece of history where the first drummer played the first drum, and we've been playing drums ever since. There's this amazing TED talk by Dr. Melanie Chang. She talks about how she's trying to study that span of time, and she's using models of the nervous system now to sort of look backwards and see how the human nervous system developed. Freaking amazing. And so the more I kind of hone in on that person trying to broadcast their physiological state, I feel like if we can tap into that a little bit more than Instagram, looking back a little bit more than looking to what's current, I feel like we can tap more into how we broadcast what we're feeling. And so that's like, if we want to play at 120 and we don't want it to feel fast, we need to regulate. We need to incorporate breath, posture, the graces, focus on our practice. Anytime I focus on my heart rate, anytime I shut down my breathe, I'll do it right now. So I'm going to regulate my heart rate now for you. Just give me a second. So I'm pulsing with my hand, I'm feeling what my heart rate is, and immediately I noticed it gets slower. The moment you pay attention to your heart rate, it goes down. Because when you're not attending to it, it's attending to whatever this, a bunch of badass drummers on a Zoom call with me trying to talk. And so my heart rate's a little higher, but the moment I slow down the breath and check in with my heart, it slows down. And that's why people meditate. That's how you get into this more meditative zone in your playing. And that's when 120 feels like 120.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I think sometimes we bring, it sounds like, it sounds like there's sometimes you can't help what you bring when you sit down at the drums because life happens to you. And these tools seem so great for making that, manageable so that it doesn't impact the playing. Because that's the other side of it,
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think of, exactly. Yeah, you put it perfectly. Like you want to try to leave your shit at the door. I've heard it put, and so I like to think of you have to sweep before you mop. Like when you sit down at the drums, you're carrying all the stuff you have from the past day, all the way from the past lifespan you've lived, and you're bringing it to the drums. And I feel like we all need to kind of sweep first before we try to mop up our mess that we have in terms of our playing. And the sweeping is making sure we know where our heart rate is, making sure we know where our muscle tension is, which is, really that level 2, the relaxation level of the graces. Like when you start shifting rhythmic rates in the feet, that's a beautiful way to check what changes physiologically. Because a lot of us think, oh, well, I have this tension now, I'm going to have this tension later. And a lot of times tension only lives at a particular emotional state, whether we're in shutdown or fight or flight or social engagement. We have different tension levels. And so we can't ever really address a tension level as something that's universal throughout our lives. We really need to focus, okay, tune in. What is my emotional state? Where am I at? And what are the corresponding tension patterns that I bring into my drumming when I'm feeling this?
Great. Well, Adam, thank you for being here again. This is great stuff, and I'd love to keep going, but we're gonna wrap it up here. For everybody that had asked, this will be recorded. I'm using the Sabian Zoom account, and they have it blocked from me being able to share files, even as the host. So what I'll do is, Adam, if you give me all the resources, I have that PDF that you shared. But in the for those of you who haven't looked, in the SEN site where I post the video, I also always go into the forum and I post that I posted it, and right in there I'll attach all the files, and then I also put all the files in the library, so they're always in the site. So if you can make it a habit to go in and look, that'd be great. And I think you'll all joining me in saying thank you, Adam. This is amazing. Again, you're just so good at it.